Mortgage Talk with Mark, and I am really excited to have a good friend of mine on today to talk about her philosophy around education. And she's actually been on my guest hot list for a long time, and she's been able to now get on the show with us. So if you have any interest in education models, either in Austin, Texas, or around the country, is that of concern to you? I I guarantee you want to listen to Mackenzie Price talk about her model, because it's extraordinary and interesting. I'm here to learn too. I was just talking to her because I want to learn. I went through the public school system. My kids all went to the public school system, and she's bringing a whole different idea on how to educate these kids these days. So, introduce yourself, Mackenzie, and tell us a little bit about you.
Well, hey, Mark, it is such a pleasure. I always love hanging out with you. And one of the
Mhm.
things that you mentioned in that intro was you said, if you have any interest in education, then you want to listen to this. And here's what I would say. I think everybody should
Mm,
have an interest in education because do you
man,
know what our greatest untapped resource is in this world? Do you have any guesses?
no, our
Human
minds,
potential.
the
It
human
is
potential.
human potential, right? And that's why I absolutely love, education because even if you're not a parent or your kids are grown up or you don't have grandkids or whatever, education is the single most important thing that can help everything else in the world. And it is such a critical thing. And, Mark, as you mentioned, you grew up in kind of traditional schools, what I call it.
Sure.
The education system in our country hasn't changed in about 150 years, right?
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
still this teacher in front of a classroom model. So,
Hmm.
if you go to the poorest school in rural India, you're going to see, a teacher teaching a group of kids,
Hmm.
in kind of a time-based system. The building's not very nice. Or you go down the street to Austin, Texas, and you go to one of the really ritzy private schools,
Hmm.
you're going to see basically the same thing. In fact, education is kind of one of the most equal things on earth when you think about the way it's done. And the kind of my whole goal the last 15 years and the rest of my life is going to be transforming education so that kids can really reach that human potential. So as you can tell, I love talking about education.
I
I
know
hope
it.
other people listen, like hearing about it.
I'm so glad you're here and to teach me as well. So, but tell us a little bit more about the broken model of traditional
Yeah.
education. You've just mentioned it, but what is
Well,
wrong with
so,
it?
I think all of us can probably relate to it because I think you and I grew up in this system. I think the vast majority of people did, which is, in the Industrial Revolution, when that started, they needed to figure out a way to educate the masses. Back in the, 1,000 years ago, the very rich and elite would get one-to-one private tutors. Think Socrates, and Plato and Alexander the Great, who
Mhm.
goes on to conquer the known world, by the time he's in his early 20s. But education was reserved for the elite. And then when the Industrial Revolution came about, they needed to figure out, okay, how do we get all these factory workers, ready to go out and be trained? And so that's when they came up with the idea of, one teacher leading a classroom of kids kind of by age group in, this time-based model. And that's what we've gone through. So if you're a fifth grade student and you roll into a school at the beginning of your fifth grade year, your teacher is going to basically be teaching, hey, I'm in charge of fifth grade material. Now, here's the problem, Mark, and it's only gotten worse since COVID. You've got a class of 25 kids in that room, and some of them need that fifth grade math knowledge, but some of them could be working a year or 2 or 3 years ahead, and some of them need to go back and fill holes from second grade, third grade, fourth grade. The poor
Right.
teacher has no choice but to say, well, I've got to kind of teach to what I've been given. That's the problem with the time-based model. And what's really,
Mm-hmm.
and I will tell you personally, where I noticed this really problem come about was when my own two daughters were getting ready to go to school. So about 12 years
You
ago.
mean when they were
Yeah, when
little?
they were little, my daughters are now 19 and 17. But when it was time for my daughter to
Okay.
go to kindergarten, I sent her to our local public school. My husband and I were both public school products. And so we sent her to local public school. And that school, by the way, it was a really lovely school. And the teachers were so devoted because they're, by the way, they're absolute heroes, right? Teachers are
Mhm.
underpaid and they're overworked and they're underappreciated. And I think that's kind of true, unfortunately, in our society today about, all these great teachers. But what I notice is that, it was just really hard to get any sort of personalized attention or allow her to go at her pace. And where that kind of came to a head was in about second grade. She and I were having a conversation, and she said to me, "Mom, I don't want to go to school tomorrow." I said, "What do you mean? Don't you love school?" And she said, "School is so boring." And I just had this moment of like,
Wow.
oh my gosh, they've taken a kid who's like tailor made to want to love school, and they've wiped that
Yeah.
passion away. And I realized it was not about that school. And it wasn't about a public school versus a private school. It was the model of
Right.
education. It was that teacher in
Yeah.
front of the
The system. Yeah.
classroom model. And so I looked around. I didn't see anything that really, was going to work. And so I decided to actually get out of the mortgage business, which is what I had been doing. I was a mortgage broker.
You were my
Yeah, I
competition
was
at
in a
one time. Yeah.
competition. Um, and I decided, okay, I got to roll my sleeves up here and figure out how we can change education. And so I started the first school in 2014 in Austin. And basically, it was,
Okay.
now it's grown to many schools here in Austin as well as around the country. But it's based off the fundamental premise that kids are limitless, and it's our job to build an environment that helps unlock that human potential. And so at our schools, our kids, we have three commitments. The first is that they will love school. And in fact, we do a thing where we survey our students every 6 weeks. Do you love school? Yes or no? We get like in the 90s for that. But then we ask another question. We say, would you rather go to school or go on vacation? And Mark, can you guess what the answer would be to that? In normal world, I think it's
Disney
like
World.
0%,
Yeah.
right? But in our world, we get in the 50s to 60s. Kind of depends on the vacation or the workshops or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
literally, kids want to go to school. They love it. The second
That's
commitment
amazing.
is that kids can learn twice as fast in only 2 hours a day. And you're probably asking like, well, how in the world are you delivering that?
Yeah. That's
And
certainly one of
here's
the questions. Yeah.
Yeah,
I want to
exactly.
know.
Here's the thing. We are using AI technology and adaptive apps so that every single kid gets that one-to-one tutor experience where they move at exactly their pace, exactly their level. They fill in all the holes that they need. And so that fifth grade student now who needs to go back and review some fourth grade concepts is able to do that. And that fifth grade student who could be working in sixth, seventh, eighth grade, math is able to do that all while they're hanging out in the same classroom together, but they're getting that one-to-one teacher experience. And then because we can deliver that one-to-one personalized learning experience, kids can learn way, way faster. You do not need to sit at a desk for 6 hours a day in order
Mm,
to crush academics. So our classes are literally top 1% in the country
that's fabulous.
because they're getting personalized education. We do it in a couple hours a day. And then, of course, one of the things you probably remember this, Mark, from when your boys were growing up, parents don't want their kids to come home after 2 hours a day. And so what do with the rest of the school day when you've got academics finished in a couple hours with no homework? What do you do the rest of the day?
Life
And the
skills.
answer to that is we teach life skills,
Love
right?
it.
Those are the things that I think we can all agree. We want our kids to be successful. We want them to know about entrepreneurship and financial literacy. I mean,
Sure.
how helpful would it be for a lot of the clients you probably interact with to like understand how interest works, right? And
Right.
understand credit scores and understand, how to do your taxes, how to create a business, how to invest in the stock market,
Right.
those
Love it.
kinds of things. So our fifth and sixth graders this past year, they ran an Airbnb. A real one. This year, they've got a food truck. And so, what we've done is kind of created this
Wow.
environment where kids love school, they're crushing their academics, and they're learning life skills.
That's fabulous. Now, back in 2014, AI wasn't a big deal
No,
like it is
no,
today.
it certainly
How are you
wasn't.
teaching?
Yeah, AI wasn't a big.
How has your model changed over the last 10
Yeah,
years or
well,
so?
we always knew back in 2014, we knew that we could use there were adaptive apps that were out there. Think about like Khan Academy is one that everybody's heard about. There are apps that we could use. What's really exploded in the last 3 years for us is we built an AI tutor that makes sure that kids are learning effectively and efficiently, kind of at the right pace. So it's really able to almost do like a complete precise measurement. And, one of the things I think about, Mark, is, the different sciences really they had their like explosion moment with the invention of a tool. So for example, biology, when the microscope was invented, catapulted that field of research. And,
Sure.
physics, when the telescope was invented, catapulted that field of research. And what artificial intelligence is going to allow us to do for the science of learning, this is the idea of how do people learn best? Artificial intelligence is that new tool that is going to allow learning science to become the most impactful science in the next decade. And I'll say, Mark, and anyone who's listening out there, there's never been a more exciting time to be a 5-year-old in this country. It
Yeah,
is so fun.
for
And,
sure.
here's the other thing I'll say that, people will always wonder because they get worried when they hear about AI is going to come in and educate. And you're telling me that, you have an AI tutor that does this. The question that comes up is, well, what about the teacher? What about that teacher? And here's what we've done in our schools is we have transformed the role of the teacher so that instead of teachers having to focus on creating lesson plans and delivering lectures and grading homework and papers, our teachers focus all of their energy on motivational and emotional support and elite mentorship. So we let our human teachers do what only humans can do well, which is that connection with kids to figure out what gets them
Mhm.
excited, what are they interested in, what are they passionate about. When they get frustrated, what do they tend to say to themselves, and how can we get them back on track? So in our schools, our
Yeah,
kids get to spend so much more time interacting not just with each other but with their teachers in a much more
yeah.
rich environment. And so I also say I don't think there's ever been a more exciting time to be a teacher than what's going to happen. And it's a very scary world out there. A lot of people have just wondered what is going to happen with education. And I kind of like bringing that message of hope. Sometimes I think of myself, yeah, I don't think of myself. You can compare it to like John the Baptist, who's like beating the drum saying, hey, something better is coming out
Yeah,
there,
wake
right?
up, wake
Something
up.
better
Yeah,
is
yeah,
coming, and it's going to be really awesome for kids, and it's going to be really awesome for teachers, and parents are going to be really excited about it. So that's what I spend my
that's
time doing. And
true.
we've got all kinds of schools in Austin and beyond.
That's so awesome. So let's go back to this 2-hour learning, philosophy. What kind of courses are they focused on in the 2 hours? Is it
Yeah.
more courses like math and science and English and
Yeah.
writing?
So our students are learning the same type of material that kids in a traditional school are learning. It's in kindergarten through 8th grade, it's based on Common Core, so it's math and science and English language and reading and history. And then at the high school level, they're taking the advanced placement courses, that kids would use. So they're learning all of that. It's just being given to them in such a more efficient manner. And we're also learning to mastery. And that's why our students do so well in their academics, is because, like if I handed you, Mark, an MCAT and said, hey, take this, entrance test for medical school, you'd be
Right.
like, I have no idea. I don't know what to tell you. I can't do it. But if I said, hey, Mark, let's
Even
go
though I've
back
had
and
some health challenges lately, I still wouldn't know what to.
that's true. Exactly. We wouldn't know that. But if I said, "Hey, let's go back and let's do some basic science and let's learn that and grow," and that's the key with mastery-based learning. And it's part of the reason that ever since COVID, we've had so much more trouble. Only did you know that only a third of students in the United States can read or do math at grade level?
Wow.
One third
One
of
third.
students can do that. And what's happened is there's been almost a cover up, because when you think about in traditional school, and again, this is public school, private school, this is traditional school, the basic way that kids are graded is by teachers who give grades. Like,
Right.
okay, you got an A minus, you got a B. And we've seen basically grade inflation where grades don't really mean a lot anymore, right? And
Mhm.
so what's happening is, our poor kids are, struggling to master the material that they've been in class for in the past, and then they get pushed along. And then our poor teachers are sitting here going, how in the world can I possibly catch these kids up and challenge these kids and
Mhm.
meet these other kids where they are? And so what artificial intelligence and adaptive app learning allows us to do is really make more efficient the time and activities that the teachers are able to do and that the students are doing. And that's kind of where the magic is. And so afternoons, when you think about this question, it's like, what would you do if you're wanting to learn life skills and you have the afternoon? And what we believe is like, let's let kids go learn life skills by doing things that they're interested in. So for example, we have a sports academy. It's called Texas Sports Academy. And in the afternoons, our students are, out there doing sports and activities and agility training, but they're also doing things like negotiating their Major League Baseball contract and then building their personal budget based on their salary, and writing the press release announcing their affiliation with the team, and then
That's so fun.
designing their Nike ad campaign, and then giving the pre-game pep talk
Yeah, yeah.
to the team, and the post-game press interview. So they're learning public speaking and financial literacy, and they're doing art and creative things, but they're doing it through this lens of like, hey, I get to pretend I'm part of the UT football team,
Right,
and
right.
get to make the decision. What do you do when your two star players on the Texas football team miss curfew the night before the national
Mhm,
championship?
mhm,
How do you handle that team
mhm.
dynamic? What's the conversation you have with those teammates? What do you tell everybody else? Those are kind of fun ways to learn life skills that get kids really excited. So that's
I
one
wanna go to
example.
school there. How do I
It
sign
is. I totally agree with you. That's the thing that's so much fun. And I think that's part of the reason we've been getting so much national attention, is because when, people like you and me who remember, like, hey, you go to school, school's kind of like eating your spinach. It's good for you. You get through it and you
you
kind of
feel
go
lucky.
forward. And so we just all know, like, well, what I did is it was fine. I turned out okay and it was
Right.
fine. And what we kind of realize is like, school shouldn't just be this thing you get through or this thing that's fine. We can truly make the 12 years that a kid spends in school, we can make it magical. We can make sure that they come out of it so well educated and so
Mhm.
prepared to be successful in the real world. And what's even better, let's give kids plenty of opportunity to spend time figuring out, like, what are they interested in? What are they good at? What does the world need? And so, for our kids, when they get, they start working on things like businesses or building apps or doing stuff. And so our kids in high school, they're able to get started on just digging into the things they want. I have one student this year who loves musical theater, absolutely loves the theater. And so she's created a musical that's now been reviewed in New York City. They've had 2 shows so far, and she's working on getting it to Broadway. That was
Wow.
entirely created and written by teenagers, performed by teenagers that she sourced from around the country. And she's getting to live her like Broadway dream as a 16-year-old, which is really
Wow.
exciting.
That's
And
fabulous.
that's what it's kind of key to, is just get kids excited about showing up to school every day and doing the cool things. Did you like school, Mark? Were you a kid who liked school?
I didn't dislike school.
Oh, that's good.
I was a decent student. My kids didn't learning, but it seems like today it's different. It seems like the public school system is, like you said, it's sense that they just want to get people through. They just want to pass them and get them out. And very few people, I
Yeah.
think, are successful in that model. Really, there are some certainly, but maybe
Y-
let's say 20%. The rest are just left.
Yeah.
Left to
Yeah. I think it's an interesting thing. I look at back at my experience in school. I was a very good student. I knew
Mhm.
how to do well in school and get good grades, but I never liked school. I actually really didn't like school. But I was good at it. But I felt, for me, it was like I was checking the box of just get done what you need to get done.
Yeah, yeah.
And the other thing is, I think about when we think about school, I love talking to kids that I'll meet, and I'll say, hey, do you like school? Yes or no? Most of them kind of go, it's fine, whatever. And then I'll say, what are your favorite things about school? What are your favorite things? And can you guess what they always say their favorite things are?
Recess, lunch,
Recess, that's for sure. Lunch, you
lunchtime.
got it. There's another two that I always hear. PE is always a
Well,
popular one.
PE. Yeah.
And and then of course, what I believe is kind of the most important one, friends.
Yeah.
It's like school is a place
Yeah.
where they get to go and hang out with their friends. And
Sure.
that for me was like my favorite part of school was just I got to see my friends, I got to do that stuff.
Yeah.
And friends are so important.
I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, so being around friends is real
You
important.
and me both,
I
buddy. You and
know,
me
I
both.
know,
We
I
get
know
it,
you
right?
are.
Um, we care about friends, but then you think about traditional school, And there's not actually that much time to like interact with your friends. It's mostly, be in class, and it's kind of generally like, listen and do as you're told. You get a little bit of time in passing periods, you get a little bit of recess, something like that. And school should be a place where you get to practice a lot of interaction, a lot of social interaction, a lot of communication. And so we spend time doing that. We spend time helping kids understand how to be successful
Mhm.
socially, because traditional school, for as important as socialization is, there's no training for it. It's just throw kids in and hope they find their spot,
Right.
and hope they're able to figure out how to navigate what's going on. And so that's another thing that we think is really important, is let's give kids some tools and stuff. And you and I have worked together in a lot of like personal development stuff, and a lot of
Absolutely.
Christian things where we've talked about those kinds of things. And I think that's a really important skills for kids to have, to know how to communicate, to know how to be interested in other people and be interesting to other people.
Yes.
The other big part, that we spend a lot of time on at our schools, is helping kids be prepared for this new world
Mhm.
by, understanding artificial intelligence tools and how to use them well, how to build things with them, how to be creators and contributors, not just consumers. So, one of the things we teach our students is, what, instead of doom scrolling TikTok all the time, or just watching YouTube endlessly, or video gaming, how about go build something,
Yeah,
right?
create something.
Go be a creator. And, humans naturally want to be creators. We want to contribute, we want to
Yes.
create.
We're
And
designed for that.
exactly. We are designed to do that, to build. And, you think about how hard social media is for young people these days, and it kind of tends to create this passive, reactionary
Mhm.
situation. And we want to teach our young people, like, don't just be blind consumers. Get out there and build and create. And I think that's an important skill too.
Well, let's talk about the students themselves. Do you have an ideal sort of student that you look for to be in your schools, or is anybody welcome? How does that work?
So it's interesting because one of the things that I think unfortunately often happens to kids in the traditional school system is they sort of get labeled at a pretty early age. Like, did you know that by third grade, if you're kind of a C student, your chances of graduating high school on time go down, your chances of going to a four-year university go down.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the really sad things. And what we find at our schools is, we don't really care how a kid comes into us academically, because we can meet them where they're at.
Mhm.
The biggest thing that I would say we look for in students who we think are going to be successful in our model is coachability. Do
Yeah.
they seem to have like a willingness to, to get coached? And here's some examples of ways that we look at that, and how do they kind of handle. We had like a 7-year-old student who came in to shadow at our school the other day, and one of the things we do is we give him like an IKEA piece of furniture, like a simple piece of IKEA furniture. But when you say simple at IKEA, nothing simple. And
Right,
we said,
right,
hey, work on putting this together. And we just are able to then kind of watch how he goes about that experience of doing it. And the kid was having a ball. He was like, this is fun. It's like a Lego set,
right.
except just a little bit different. And our teachers are able to really kind of see from there, like, okay, this kid has got an interest in trying something and learning something. So in general, we find that the vast majority of kids can do really well in the model. And the reason is because they're really getting personalization and personalized attention, both from an academic perspective as well as from the teacher, who's got time to really get to know each and every student and understand what motivates them. One of the things that, I think is interesting about the traditional model, and again, I'm not against public school versus private school. This is the same in both. But often, Mark, when people do well in school, it's attributed to a couple of things. One is, general intelligence, IQ. Like, are they, smart
Right.
enough to kind of do this? The other thing, though, is level of conscientiousness. Is a student willing to turn in their homework, to
Right.
study for the test, to write the
Responsible. Right.
paper? And so if a kid's not doing well in traditional school, that's often considered the kid's fault. It's like, oh, he's either not the sharpest knife in the drawer, or, he's lazy, or he's not engaged. And what we believe at our schools, it's the opposite. If a kid isn't doing well in our schools, it's our fault.
It's
It's the
your fault.
school's
Yeah.
fault, because it means that we haven't unlocked that thing that motivates that student and what gets them excited. And so that's what our teachers are able to spend their time doing. Like, okay, what can help this kid, get excited for, doing something and working on something. And then the other big part is when you give kids the right level and pace of material, it makes it a lot more interesting for that kid to work on. You would be frustrated if you're trying to take the MCAT, but you're not frustrated when you're, building a financial model for your mortgage client, right? Like,
Right.
because you know what you're doing and you're learning on that. And that's the other big thing is when kids are learning at the pace that they need to learn and they're learning at the level, it's one of the things that we believe competence leads to confidence. So that little girl who thinks, I'm not a math person, my family's not math people, or I'm dumb at math, when they actually fill holes and get mastery learning, pretty soon math makes sense. And then they're like, oh,
I'm good at this.
I'm
Yeah.
actually good at math. I'm not
Yeah.
dumb. It changes their
I love it.
self-perception. And so that's what we're out trying to do. And I think that's what is going to make a difference for, humanity and human potential.
Amen. Amen. Well, listen, as expected, the time flew by, and I knew it would with my friend Mackenzie. But tell us, let's wrap it up with how do people get a hold of you or your schools, and if they want to do some more research around that?
Yeah, to learn more, one of the things, if you're on social media at all, on Instagram or Facebook, you can go to Future of Education, and you can just kind of see what our schools are like and what our philosophy is like. You can see things from that. You can also go to 2hourlearning.com and you can see all of our different schools. We've got schools in Georgetown and Lake Travis and Austin. We're opening in Bastrop. And then we've got schools around the country that we're doing, and there are lots of different types of flavors, different price points for these private schools. We've also got some charter schools that we're doing virtually and that we're working on opening in Texas. So 2hourlearning.com, or go check out Future of Education.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, Mackenzie. We may have to do this again, but I do appreciate your time. I've learned a lot, and I'm so excited about the future with what you're up to in education.
Well, Mark, you are the best, absolutely the best. You're one of my favorite people in the world, and
Oh,
your wife
sweet.
is the most lovely woman. And I always have fun, so it's great
Let's
to,
get
to
together.
to be here. Thank you so much. Have a great